All right, everyone. Welcome, welcome. Great to have all of you joining us today. We are going to hang out for just a minute to make sure that everyone can join and get settled in. We have some amazing guests today, so be sure to grab a drink and a snack so you don't miss a thing. While we wait for folks to filter in, I thought we could use this time to visit about XYPN Live. That is, of course, XYPN's conference we host every year for fee-only financial advisors. Top spot to be this year, I tell ya. Let's see, Ryan, Autumn, Scott, have any of you been before? You're going to be there this year? Who's coming?
Just like 8 years in a row. Yes, I've
Oh,
been every year since San Diego.
that's
It's worth
amazing.
it. Come hang out. Introduce yourself.
Love that. Autumn, how about you? Have you been?
Yeah, I've been several times. My first time was in 2017 and took a little hiatus and been back the last couple of years.
Amazing. Love it. Scott, how about you? Are we going to see you there?
I'm actually going to be hiking the Oregon coast that week, but I will make a concerted effort for next year.
Perfect. We
I'm so
love that.
curious where it is next year because Minneapolis is my home city. I don't live there anymore, but so I get to go home and visit my nieces and call it a business trip. I mean, yes, I will do business.
Sounds
Um,
perfect.
Amy, small plug. I just remembered I was thinking of this speaking, but I'm speaking on student loans. And I know a lot of people in my network anyway that are teachers are on the PSLF strategy sort of deal, looking for forgiveness or trying to understand their options. So that's a good chance to understand that if you're interested.
Yes, everyone come. No matter where you're at, if you're just thinking about launching a firm, if you've had a firm for 10 years, it's going to be the right fit for you. So we'd love to see you there. We do have a code that is good through Friday, September 13th at midnight, and that is SAVE100. Save is in all caps. I'll drop that in the chat as well. And that will get you $100 off a non-member pass. Actually, member or non-member. So join us. All right, perfect. Well, we are just past the hour, so I'm officially going to get us started. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Amy Arno, and I am the Director of Business Development at XYPN. Today, I'm thrilled to host this event, Understanding 403(b) Plans, How to Support Educator Clients in Navigating Retirement Plan Options. I've got Scott Dauenhauer with us today, and then XYPN members Autumn Knutson and Ryan Frailich. I have just a few housekeeping items to go over. First and foremost, this session does qualify for 1 CE credit for the CFP. So we will submit that on your behalf, but please, please, please stay on for at least 50 minutes. If you don't, and we do have to check for each and every one of you, then it doesn't qualify. So hang on there with us for 50 minutes. If you do have any questions, please use the Q&A module at the bottom of Zoom. That's going to help us keep track of the questions that we still need to answer. So we're going to have time here at the end for the group to moderate questions for you. So please use that. Also, when the webinar is over, you will be able to fill out a survey with Zoom. We would love to hear how we did today. Please also include ideas for topics that you would like to hear about in the future. So we normally host these free webinars every month. Next month, the team is all going to be at XYPN Live. We will be recording a session there. So that's going to be on how to launch your firm, whether you're going to go solo, partner with someone, or tuck under. So we will have a panel of folks available for that. So please check out our XYPN events page. We're going to host that there afterwards. So yes, look for that content after XYPN Live. Okay, well, that is it for me today. Let's get to the reason that you all are here. I'm going to turn it over to Ryan for introductions and the session.
Sure. So, just a piece of knowledge for everyone to know is that I am in New Orleans, and if you've watched the news, that means we are getting hit by a hurricane in roughly about 1 hour from now. So, if suddenly we have technical difficulties, we will fix them, but it means I lost my power or my internet. So, just know that that's happening in the background. I'm going to turn it to Scott first. Scott, who are you?
Hey, Ryan. Are we going to put up the slides or
It should
am I
be
not?
up. Yep, it's up, right? I've got your slide up.
Okay, I'm not seeing the slides. All right. So, hey, everybody. My name is Scott Dauenhauer. I'm a CFP, master's degree in financial planning, owner of Meridian Wealth Management. I've been working in the 403B public school government 403B space for over 20 years and been advocating on behalf of teachers for a little over 20 years. I also have done defined contribution consulting for government plans for over 20 years and am authored Wild West, providing fiduciary advice to public school employees, which if you stay till the end, we'll give you an email address where you can get a free copy of that. Also, co-author of the out of print, the 403B Wise Guide, and Teach and Retire Rich, which is about to come out with a new version very soon. Co-authored that with Dan Otter, who runs 403bwise.org. I'm also the director of research at 403bwise.org. Okay, this is just too much. My wife is a teacher. That's how I got into this. There's a whole backstory. You can read it in my book. I'm going to let Autumn and Ryan introduce themselves.
Thanks, Scott.
Awesome. Hi, everybody. I'm Autumn Knutson. I just started Styled Wealth, a fee-only RIA through XY's support earlier this year. I used to be a teacher and Teach for America, 2012 DFW. Shout out to that. If anyone signed up after I posted a few days ago on our Facebook group, or 2013 or 14. Married a TFA alum as well, Michael Campbell. Used to be a KIP through college counselor, and then through hiring a CFP, long story short, I was inspired to become one. So now I do full-time financial planning. I work with a lot of people who are impact-driven. That includes educators, people in nonprofit work, as well as a lot of people in civic duty or politics and whatnot. So have had my own share of understanding 403B plans and learning through experience, honestly, in a lot of ways, and understanding that you don't know what you don't know. And my hope in this session is that people can come away with a little bit more higher level skills on how to help people unwind a lot of times 403Bs, or at minimum optimize what they're within. Your turn, Ryan.
Autumn and I have lived similar lives. So I also was a Teach for America Corps member in 2006, taught for a while, and then also met my wife while teaching. And so she is in her 17th year in the classroom. I am one of those people who bought a 2% fixed annuity when I was 25 years old. Yay, exactly what all 25-year-olds should be doing, what we would recommend to all 25-year-olds. My first job out of teaching was as an HR director for a charter school here in New Orleans, and I helped unwind a problematic 403B plan there, which kind of helped set off the alarm bells for how many educators are served this garbage, for lack of a better word. Not all of it's garbage, but there's a lot of garbage out there that you have to navigate. So I started my RIA in 2017, and I have that start occasionally taking new clients. Down at the bottom, I'm running a small lifestyle practice, if you will. So I'm going to jump in here and we're going to do a quiz. Anyone know what this is from? You can drop it in the chat if you want to say what it's from. Anybody know what movie it's from? It's okay if you didn't already figure out its speed. This is when he says pop quiz hot shot. Thank you. So pop quiz hot shot, we're going to drop some quick multiple choice or true false questions into the chat. And when we drop them in the chat, you can take a second to think about them. If you want to write an answer, you can write an answer, and we'll go from there. So Scott, you want to drop the first one? All right, so in the chat, you can go ahead and read it, but it is a true or false question from Scott. So take a second to read it. Thanks, Carl. Yeah, so the correct answer is that this is false. So most 401k plans are covered, and some 403b plans are covered. However, the vast majority of 403b plans that serve educators, whether they be K-12 educators or university employees, are not covered by ERISA. And being covered by ERISA is all those things that is regulation to make sure that they're not being given things that are inappropriate. So the audits, the oversight on contributions, the testing, a lot of those things come with oversight from ERISA. I'm going to ask Scott to drop in the next question.
Oh, sorry about that. It did not copy. Give me just a sec.
All good.
Got to hit that Command C button a few more times. There we go. There we go.
A lot of B's and C's, so everyone knows it wasn't A. The correct answer is B, $450 billion. No, this is as of 2016, so imagine that's grown a lot. That is a ton of money that doesn't have ERISA oversight. That is a ton of money of educators, professors, university employees that isn't subject to the same things that we do for the vast majority of 401k plans. So it's a huge market. There are a ton of people that aren't necessarily getting the help that they need to get. So I'm going to go on to two more questions that are both multiple choice. So Scott's going to take the next one. I knew you were excited for this one, Scott.
Can we take a moment to read them, Ryan?
Yeah. For the company Equitable, one's called AXA. How many pages long is the prospectus and associated documents for their most sold product, which is a Series 201 variable and fixed annuity? How many total pages are there? Honestly, you couldn't put this number high enough. It is, in fact, 495 pages. I swear that this is true. I have it open on my computer right now. If you wanted to read everything that gets disclosed about that product, which is their most sold product within 403B plans, you would be reading 495 pages. The prospectus itself is, 78, and then the associated documents are a lot more. One more multiple choice question. So for that same product, so that's the AXA 201 annuity product, what is the minimum? Remember, we're talking minimum here, annual fee that is charged. I like Chris's response. Just ouch. The minimum fee is 1.77, but don't worry, there is a maximum fee. It's 3.85%, everybody. So the minimum, you cannot pay less than 1.77% in fees, and that's if you do everything perfectly while using this product. So thanks for playing along with our pop quiz here at the beginning, but we wanted to start out by just showing like, what are the things that you should be aware of when you're getting into this space? So a few things, and I'm going to put these up on the screen, and then I'm going to go through individual slides for each of these, but these are 5 pitfalls that I want you to watch out for. Every 403B is not going to have this, but many of them will. And I think that's the tricky part is I think if I were doing this in 2018, I would have translated 403B equals bad. And that's not true. Like, that's not true. If you think that, like, I hope we can dissuade you of that. But many of them are. So we have to sort through it for our clients. There are plenty of 403B products that are low cost and exactly what you would want for your clients to have. But that's not always the norm. Like I said, there's, $450 billion in products that don't have ERISA protection. So I'm going to go through these 5 pitfalls before I turn it over to Autumn. So this is what happens when you ask ChatGPT to give you a teacher workroom with food. Anyone who's ever worked in schools or been in schools knows that that is not what a teacher workroom looks like anywhere that I've ever worked. I don't know about you, Autumn or Scott, your wife, but not exactly. However, what do we know? We know that if you are not paying for something, you are paying somewhere else. You are the product somewhere. So if someone's hanging out in your lunchroom and saying, hey, sign on this thing, if someone's saying, hey, come to this free dinner, if someone's saying, hey, we have lunch for the teachers today because we appreciate them so much, like that is being paid for somehow. That is not out of the goodness of their hearts. To me, if I see a person who is hanging around a teacher break room, workroom, and they're offering free advice, every alarm bell on the planet should be going off. So that's a very important thing, just letting clients know, like that person who's hanging around and maybe like brought candy bars or brought donuts or brought something to the school, odds are they're getting paid a whole lot of money, and you got to figure out whether it's you who's funding them and getting paid all and paying them all that money. A huge thing to look out for is surrender charges. Yes, a union rep can be wonderful, although some unions are good in this space, some are less good in this space. A surrender charge. So if you would like to take your own money after you have left your job, you might not be able to. A common feature of 403B plans is what's called a surrender charge, i.e. you aren't able to take your money until you've been gone from that job for a certain amount of time. If you do, you're going to pay a big percentage of it as a penalty, as a surrender charge, right? And so I just copied this as one, for example. They are not all the same. Some are different. Some last, I've seen up to like 8 years is about the longest I've seen. Some are less dramatic than this, but just know, like, you leave your job as a teacher, you want to move your 403B to say your IRA, just to make it a simple example, boom, 7% right off the top if you try to do it in the first year, just gone. So that's something to know before you get into the product. because if you're already in the product, obviously you're going to have to figure your way out somehow. So that's something, if you're advising someone who has the opportunity to look into a 403B, you should know ahead of time whether or not they're going to get caught with this on the back end. Sorry, my lights are starting to go here. Extremely high fees. I was thinking about putting a chart in here, the chart where you're like, Scott invests and his fees are Z, and Autumn invests and her fees are X. What's the difference after 30 years of investing? But we are all financial planners, and I think you all understand that a 2+% fee means hundreds of thousands of dollars less for that teacher to have for retirement, for that professor to have for retirement. 2% is not necessarily the height. Like I said, I've seen 3+% fees. So just know that if you have a client who is in the 403B space, like, you need to be very conscious that it's really important that you check into what the fees are for whatever products they're being offered, because oftentimes they'll be 2+%. Yes, this is an actual screenshot. Yes, this is an actual statement. This is my own product. I'll give you a chance if you would really like to figure out what $17.31 of earnings on $32.91 as a starting balance is. But if you multiply it out, it means I got paid a little over 2% per year. I purchased this product when I was 25 years old. It had a multiple year surrender charge, and it paid me 2% per year. Why did I do it? Because they gave me a candy bar and told me to sign on the dotted line, and I was busy and stressed and didn't know any better. I mean, I wish I could say something that paints me in a better light than that, but I can't. That's really why I did it. I thought I was being so responsible. Look at me. I'm getting my retirement match from my employer. I'm 25 years old. I'm so on top of this whole personal finance thing. Whoops. I wasn't. It took me years to unwind this, and I've gotten very good at unwinding. This is a Voya product. But you'll see a lot of fixed annuities and variable annuities within 403B plans. So that's not typically something I would recommend for most clients, in their 20s, 30s, 40s. It has some place, obviously, for people in their later years, but not an appropriate product, not something that I think any of us could sign off on as a fiduciary. That is a real screenshot from my real statement that I did pull up for this. And I'm going to show you a couple things. There can be dozens of vendors. So I'm going to unshare my screen for a quick second, or I'm going to go out of the slides for a quick second. So one of them, if you go to Texas, you're in the state of Texas, let's take a look at the Texas 403B approved vendor list. Whoops. Can everyone see this still? Scott and Autumn, if you nod and just make sure yep, good. These are the vendors available in Texas. These are just the vendors. So if you want to put money in a 403B as a public school educator in Texas, here are your choices. This seems like something most teachers or professors have a lot of time to sift through. You just have to pick one of these companies. And then when you get to the company, they're going to have dozens of options for you as well. Now you see on here, like Vanguard's on here, right? Like there are reputable institutions that you can get a perfectly fine financial product from. Also Valix on here, which in my opinion, most of the things that they're offering are not going to be appropriate for most of the teachers that we're talking to. So you're taking a very busy, overworked profession and saying, here, choose from these 50 different plans. Now, even if you are lucky enough to be in a state where some consultant or some other company, this is from a consultant site in Oregon, has gone through and said, like, we've taken all the information, we've centralized it for you. You know what? We're going to show you how much the fees are for Voya. We're going to let you actually see it. So you're not just working from a PDF. You actually have some more information. So for example, Voya, this is a state of Oregon. This is a consulting company that put together everything for the Oregon vendors. So I'm going to click on Voya's fees for the state of Oregon. And what I love so much about this is it does give you fees, which is really helpful. You can see total indicative cost 1.44%. But my favorite is if you go down here to these expense ratios, let's find it. Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? Here we go. We've got our target date funds that start with 1.08%. We are talking target date funds with over 1%, and that's not the all-in fee. That's only the expense ratio. There's the other fees that get charged along with the 403B. So just to say that these are products that, while you can find good products, oftentimes you're wading through a morass to get there. And so you're helping a lot of clients either on the front end, hopefully we're on the front end, figure out what within the things that they are offered are worth investing in, or on the back end, figuring out, okay, these are the options you have. You've already been investing. Let's figure out the best one and figure out how to get you from the product that you're in right now to the best possible product while you're still employed here. So I'm going to turn it to Autumn now. Autumn, so you can take over at this point, and just let me know when you need me to turn the next slide.
Sure. Yeah, will do. Yeah, so Ryan, I was thinking as you were talking that a lot of what I had put here is just kind of reiterating some of the things you said. So like reviewing the surrender schedule, y'all saw this before, that the surrender schedule typically is higher fees in the first year or months, and then lower fees over the next 5, 7, 10 years. And so in general, when I was first doing this, I thought, well, let's not have any fees. And now, as many of you probably know in your practices, that it's an opportunity cost, right? If we can just wait until the anniversary contract or something of that sort, get a slightly lower fee, now be able to make more than say 2%, like in Ryan's example, and now make market return at 7, that might be worth swallowing that fee. I do think it's important to try to explain in dollars that people can understand for your clients what that difference is and why you're recommending it, just for them to understand. Expense ratios is kind of jargony, but to say, hey, you have to pay $3,000 to get out of this, but now that you have $20,000 saved, that difference of 2% to 7% is this much in the first year and this much moving forward. So those real dollars can show them that these fees really, really add up, right? And many of us on this call know that, but that doesn't translate the way that teachers and educators will be able to do math as quickly as we can in the way that they've come to learn about their finances. Things for you all to be aware of. Determine plan total fees. So there's expense ratios. We're all familiar, or many of us are familiar with those terms and what to look for. There's a contract percent, or as Ryan mentioned with the multiple choice, there's a minimum and a maximum. The minimum were just those target date funds, right? The investment options. I think it would be really helpful for all of us if we're looking at our educator clients to one thing I do, because Ryan and Scott, I realized, go into the details of a lot of things that are provided in the handbooks. I'll sometimes just have them go straight to the rep or the clients to put me on the email, and I'll just send a few pointed questions to kind of get at it quickly, especially if you're not as familiar with this and you're trying to help the client, but you're a little in over your head. Maybe emailing them directly versus going through a long prospectus of sorts might be more advantageous for you to not spend so much time if you're not truly trying to serve exclusively or primarily educators, but still want to serve them well. So compare surrender charges to total fees in the plan to determine whether you should divest, or I've had some clients where their first dollars go into less expensive options, say an IRA, and then we do maybe return to the 403B, even though it's not ideal, because the tax advantages are better than a taxable brokerage. So at the end of the day, like most advice, it depends on you and your client's situation, but we just hope that you know things to look for in how to determine whether a 403B is a poor fit and how poor of a fit, and where that goes in your calculus of the client's overall plan. Next slide, please, Ryan. So some alternatives. We're talking about 403Bs and what to consider, but other things, IRAs, as many of us are aware of kind of diving into that can have a lot more flexibility, far lower cost, but they have lower limits, right? So many of our clients max those out quite quickly. A spousal employer plan might be a way to max out their contribution, especially if they are privileged enough to have a mega backdoor Roth IRA option or Roth option, something of that sort. 457s, different kind of plan altogether, but that's something Scott can talk about a bit more in a moment, but those might be advantageous to consider as well. And then things that we wanted to just kind of share with y'all on the document and to say on a high level, if you are looking to do a rollover from a 403B or get out of it, paperwork, it's kind of like the student loan situation. There's a lot of red tape. There's a lot of ways to get hung up. So I would be detail oriented. I would get things in writing. I would call with the client, because there's a lot of jargon people use and it gets confusing very quickly. Make copies before you send any originals out. It says be aware, as Ryan mentioned earlier, some of the worst actors are some of the ones that you might find the most difficulty in getting out of, or having just a lot of nuance to it, or there might be something contradictory as well, honestly. Signature requirements. I generally assume wet signature. If it's not difficult to get, they're both nodding. Let's just do wet. If a client is really averse to that or just doesn't have a printer because they're digital, then we can do that if it's accepted. But I've even had it where we've gotten pre-approval in writing and it still gives us a hang up. So these are things we've learned along the way to try to eliminate the headache for the client and ultimately for you as well, but the client, because that's your relationship. Paperwork can expire. It can expire in days, which is baffling. But if they got something in March, you're meeting again in September, I would not use that same paperwork. I would have it be resent or confirmed that that is the current updated paperwork, especially because educators work on different year timelines than us as well. So it might very well be the case there. Set timelines for checking in, and don't trust, do verify. It was kind of our end all that we wanted to say, that just because someone says they will do it or it is being done by this timeline, you are the ultimate person that the client trusts to make sure it's done. And you're the only one that really cares that the money gets out or moved if that's what you're doing. So I'll leave it. Yeah.
I always like to say, like, if you feel like the process can't be possibly be as stupid as it is, you're probably going in the right direction. Because it's just like that. This space is set up to be, you know, spin you around 3 times on the baseball bat and send you off on your adventure, is really kind of how it feels to unlock money that a client has put into a 403B. So I think Autumn's don't trust, do verify is spot on. I think, Scott, you're going to take over here and talk about a couple of things about what happens if you are in a 403B. So like, all right, you've been in it, you didn't know, a client comes to you, maybe they're in their 50s, they've invested for a long time. What are some things to know if you're actually going to go through figuring out like how to surrender this, or how to figure out what the best way out is if you've already made, if your client comes to you and have made a decision that they shouldn't have in the past, or that they didn't know that they shouldn't have in the past. So I'll let you take over.
Yeah, I didn't realize that those bullet points were going to go up individually. You can throw them all up if you want. So this is kind of building upon what Autumn had said. So always check. There's a number of things that you should be checking before surrender. One of them is the guaranteed minimum interest rate. Believe it or not, there might be a really good interest rate there, and you might not want to surrender. Today, 3% doesn't sound like, you know, a great guaranteed interest rate, but 5 years ago, if you had a client who has a fixed income need already, and interest rates on the 10-year are 1% and below, the fixed annuity at 3% might not be a bad place to be, at least for that time period. Also, I've had 4.5%, 5.5%, and 6% guaranteed minimum interest rates that I've come across, so double check. Also, contract date, Autumn already talked about this. You always want to find out when the contract date is, because I have seen people surrender a policy. You've probably done this in your own practice, where you surrender a policy and it's literally a month or days before the next contract date, of which either the surrender charge goes down by 1% or might even go away. So always check that. With Equitable, which is a pretty big company in this space, they've got a bizarre surrender schedule. It's actually 12 years. And if you're within that 12 years of the contract being opened, there is a 5% surrender fee on all contributions made in the prior 6 years. So you actually have to find out when the last contributions were made in order to figure out whether or not there's a surrender charge. The easiest thing to do is just make a phone call. Also, annuitization may be an option. This sounds like a weird thing, and this is probably dating myself, but there used to be a product called a 2-tier annuity, and we actually kind of see it now with certain variable annuities where you have to annuitize in order to get the higher value. But there used to be these fixed annuities that were 2 tiers, meaning you got 2 different interest rates. You got one interest rate for just sitting in the contract. You got another interest rate if you decide to annuitize that contract. The good news is generally there's a solution to getting, if you didn't annuitize, you didn't get that higher rate. So you'll literally have a statement where it might be a base rate, a base account balance of $50,000 and a annuitization balance of $75,000, and you're losing out on $25,000 of interest. Generally, you can annuitize that contract over a period certain time period. It depends on their age, but you can do a period certain annuitization, and you can annuitize that either as an exchange to another 403B, we'll get to that in a minute, or as a rollover to an IRA. And that money will move from the 403B to the better 403B or the better IRA without taxation. And you'll get that higher balance. Probably not going to come across one of those, but every so often I still see them. Finally, there may be living benefits. So if you've got a variable annuity that has living benefits, yes, the fees might be 3%. but be careful in surrendering it without doing your due diligence on that contract. I have come across contracts that are ugly in terms of fees, but it would have been crazy to just surrender that contract because we actually would have been giving up a pretty big benefit. And finally, understand the indexed annuity crediting strategies. That is a whole other webinar.
Yeah.
Indexed annuities are becoming a really big deal in 403B because they pay massive commissions. Speaking of conflicts of interest and commissions, if you go through, I'm going to go through a few things that you might see. Ryan alluded to this earlier, the agents that are planting themselves in the lunchrooms. This is directly from the small print of an equitable disclosure document. You can read the rest of it. I'm just going to read the highlighted part. FP stands for financial professional, and they must meet certain minimum sales requirements in proprietary insurance products to qualify for health and retirement benefits. Essentially, if they don't sell enough equitable products, their health insurance subsidy for that month or that time period gets reduced or goes away. And that's a huge conflict of interest. And the people who are buying these products don't know that they might be being sold this product purely because the rep needs to provide health insurance for their family, which is absolutely unconscionable in my opinion. But this is what we're up against. These are the type of incentives that drive 403B sales. One of the questions that was asked by someone who's on the webinar was, why are the products so bad? Sometimes because the incentives are there to push the bad products. On this next slide, you'll see some of the marketing that goes out to educators. On the left-hand side, you'll see this used to be California only, but now they're expanding outside of California. We're writing to make sure you're taking advantage of the 5% match on your 403B or 457. How nice of them. I mean, this is so nice of them to let everybody know they have the 5% match. Here's the thing, they don't have a 5% match. The vast majority of teachers do not get a match. There are some out there. Very few public K-12 educators get a match. The 5% they're referring to is a bonus fixed indexed annuity that they are going to sell them. And as we all know, that's not the same as a match.
Nope.
On the right was another email that's sent to my wife. It looks like it's sent by the school district. It looks really official. Take this audit. It's just a scam to get you to click and get you in touch with somebody who's going to sell you products. These are some of the incentives that are offered. So National Life Group is really big in this space, depending on the area that you're in. And if you sell enough of their product, well, they already had it this year, but they went to the Ritz-Carlton in Maui. They went to Los Cabos last year. They've gone to Italy. This little one on the right here, Travel the World. These are all places that if they sell enough 403B products and enough Index Universal Life products, they'll get to go on these amazing trips and get all these cool prizes. The one on the right here is from a company called Value Teachers. And believe it or not, they're actually a multi-level marketing organization that sells annuities and other insurance products to teachers. There's a reason.
It's like Tupperware parties, but for teachers' retirement.
Yeah, there's a reason I call it the Wild West.
Yeah.
All right, so let's get to some meat here. One of the big things you really need to know, most school districts work with a third party called a compliance administrator. I call them compliance third party administrators. Essentially, this is not like a 401k TPA. Because as Ryan mentioned, there are generally multiple vendors, multiple products. And because there are so many vendors, there are so many products, there has to be an entity involved that basically acts as the sheriff and keeps everything in compliance and approves distributions and runs salary reduction agreements and keeps everything in line and in compliance with IRS rules. And so most school districts don't have the capacity to do this on their own. So they farm it out to an independent, well, let me strike that. They call themselves independent compliance administrators, but they're rarely independent. They are generally highly conflicted. almost all of their income comes from the very vendors that are selling the worst products. So they're not really there to make the plan good. They're just there to make sure that people get into the worst products so they can collect a fee from those vendors. But you do need to be able to work with them, and you need to be able to understand their policies and their procedures, because they run everything. Almost everything that you want to do, exchanges, rollovers, loans, salary reduction agreements, any sort of distribution, except for required distributions, they generally have to be approved first by the compliance administrator. And that's usually this third party. Sometimes a school district will do their own approvals. I literally just did one this morning with San Diego schools. They do their own approvals. It's very rare, but it does happen. Generally, there's a compliance administrator involved. The biggest one is a company called TSA Consulting Group or Omni. You'll see them a lot. But there's a lot of regional ones out there. The first thing you want to do when you are working with an educator is find out what school district they're in and who is their compliance administrator, if they have one, because that's where you're going to be needing to get paperwork and running things through to get them done. They handle all the transactions.
Oh yeah, same thing.
Did I put it in there twice? All right.
Yeah. All right.
So what are some solutions for bad 403B products? Autumn alluded to this earlier. So there's a term that you have to become familiar with in 403B. We all like to think about rollovers. Getting out of a 401k means rolling the money over. In the world of 403B, you can actually move the money from one 403B within the plan to another 403B within the plan, because there's generally multiple vendors. And when you do that, it's called an exchange. It's not a rollover. And the reason I'm saying this is so important is because if you go and get the rollover paperwork, which is sometimes different than the exchange paperwork, oftentimes different, you're going to have everything rejected. And so you have to know that you're performing an exchange, and you have to know that when you're going to get the paperwork that you say the term exchange when it's going from one product within the plan to another product within the plan. So how do you know what other products or what other vendors are in the plan? That's a tough one. I'm going to show you, I'm going to share my screen in just a minute and give you a resource for that. But you're going to want to look for the compliance administrator and try to find out what other vendors are available. Hopefully you'll see a company like Vanguard or Fidelity or Aspire. So what are some solutions? One, exchange to a better 403B vendor. Two, if they have a qualifying event, if they're over age 59 and a half, if they no longer work for the school district, you might consider rolling it over to an IRA. There still might be reasons to keep it within the 403B structure, but if you deem it necessary, roll it over to an IRA. Another thing you can do, if you have a bad 403B and there are no good 403B vendors, or maybe there are, but you don't want to contribute to them, you can look at the 457. I'm going to go over 457s in just a minute, so I'm just going to put a pin in that. But switching contributions to the 457 might be a good way, especially if there's not a good 403B. Sometimes there is a good 457 available. And then finally, a taxable brokerage account, or we prefer a Roth IRA if they qualify. Once that's filled up, potentially a taxable brokerage. When you're looking at 2.5% in fees, oftentimes a taxable brokerage account funded with an ETF might be a better way to go. But as Autumn says, that's very client dependent. Now, Ryan, if you don't mind, I'm going to share my screen real quick.
Yep, you totally can. I'm just going to jump in and say one thing quick, which is, sometimes the best thing you can do if you have a new client who comes to you and has been putting money for 5, 10, 15 years into one of these products, like just stopping them from putting more money into it is the most important thing. Like, yeah, okay, yes, you used to do that. We're going to have you put money in a Roth IRA, in a taxable brokerage, in your spouse's account that is better. So sometimes like step one is just like stop them from putting more money in one of these products and then figure out what to do after that. Yeah, Scott, you can share.
Can you see it?
No, let me stop share. Then I'm going to stop share, and then yours should pop up.
All right.
There he goes.
Okay, now people can see it. So this is 403bwise.org. This is a nonprofit organization run by Dan Otter, and I'm the director of research at it. We've got a couple cool resources for you. One, you can hopefully pull up the approved vendor list for your school district. Now, we don't have it for everybody, but we do have it for almost 5,000 school districts. So, for example, let's just look at California. You can pop in the state, and then you can look for I'm going to just put in my wife's school district. We live in Murrieta, California. MNO, if we can find the U here. There it is. So if you click it, two things will happen. One, we actually grade these plans. I'm not going to get into the grading system today, but the vendors will all come up, and we have a check mark next to the vendors that we think are good and appropriate. So this is one resource that you can use to hopefully find out what vendors are available in a particular school district. If you can't find it on here, try to find the compliance administrator for that school district. The next question I get is, how do I know what vendors are good? So Dan and I have come up with a rating system for vendors, and we don't have all of them, but we have the main ones. The ones that you're probably going to see most often are captured here. And we have created a traffic light system. Green means go, yellow means proceed with caution, red means stop, don't use a red vendor. Do a little more diligence if you've got a yellow vendor. Green, as I said, means go. You can, I'll put this link in the chat here in just a minute, but you can see how we grade them or how we give them their ratings just by clicking on the info button. So like Vanguard and Fidelity have no asset-based fee, no revenue share, and you could build a index-based portfolio for less than 0.2%. So they're green plus. Okay, I'm going to stop my share and let you go back, Ryan.
Sure.
I guess I could.
We got a couple of questions in there that we will revisit. So person who mentioned the 457 403B, know that we will come back to that.
Okay, so solutions for bad plans. This gets a little more difficult because often we're working with the participant, not the employer. And also often employers are not willing to make changes.
Reticent, to say the least.
Yes.
I did just type into the chat for Scott, because I'm not sure if you caught it, but somebody asked about principal, and I shared that like I worked with a network that was getting charged 2.62%. And so sometimes like I had no clients there as individuals, but the school itself worked with, we worked together, and we went from 2.62 to about 0.95, which frankly is still pretty high. Yeah. But it's a whole lot lower. And so sometimes you got to work at the plan level instead of the individual level.
Harm reduction, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So if there are little things that you can do to help improve the plan, great. One of them might be to see if you can get the school district to add a green vendor. Some districts, it's really easy to do, and they're willing to do it. Other districts, it's like pulling teeth. Other solutions are a good 457. Oftentimes, states have very good 457s that might be available to the school district, and the school district doesn't know that. If you really have the ear of benefits administrators, you can hopefully get them to consider reducing vendors or going single vendor, actually having one vendor doing an RFP process and taking control of their plan. Chicago Public Schools has done a great job of this. Montgomery County Public Schools, schools in Denver. We're starting to, Alaska, Anchorage. We're starting to see this more and more. If nothing else, remove red vendors, specifically the indexed annuity providers. They're the worst. And if we can get them to add some disclosure and transparency to their programs, even better. I put a warning that this is hard and takes time. It's a lot of work. Okay, we're almost done here, that we can get to your questions. I want everybody to know what a 457 is, because they are, in my opinion, a 457 is a better plan than a 403B, as long as the fees are reasonable. So a 457B is a government plan. It's not the 457F that you might be thinking of. That's a completely different animal. While they are non-ERISA, many states actually have a fiduciary duty for their 457 encoded in state law. And the Small Business and Jobs Protection Act of, I believe, 1997 requires these to be in trust. So that money is not available to creditors of the school district. So it's as safe as a 403B and can be a fantastic alternative. Many states offer a plan that a school district can simply adopt. Dan and I at 403Bwise are working on a tool that you'll be able to eventually use to find out if it's available and whether or not it can be adopted.
I'll just say, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say they're very, very similar. 457 and 403B are very similar. There's just a few differences. What were you going to say, Ryan?
I have some clients in Minnesota, so it's a teacher. One of the spouses is a teacher, and one works a corporate job with a pretty high income. And they were like, "We're maxing out the 401k. We're doing the backdoor Roth. We're putting money under kids' 529s. Like, what else should we be doing?" And they had, the teacher spouse was putting money in the pension, and then there were all these 403Bs that were 2+% fees. And I was like, wait, does Minnesota have a good 457? They in fact do. And here's another $23,000 a year that you're able to get tax deferred with really low fees. I think it's like 0.2% or something like that. It's pretty low. And like it just wasn't advertised. So like she had people in the workroom telling her to invest in 403Bs, no one telling her to invest in 457s. And it was just a thing I sort of stumbled into, frankly, because I didn't know at the time. But so it's just a situation where she wanted to put dollars away in a tax deferred account, and no one had ever brought up the 457. So it's not there for everyone all the time, but where it is, definitely pursue it.
And it's usually not brought up because nobody's getting paid to promote it.
Yep.
But it is, and Minnesota has a fantastic 450. It's one of the best state plans in the country.
It's through Empower. You wouldn't know the difference between it and a regular 401, like a 401k. You can get Vanguard target date funds if that's your jam. Like it's pretty straightforward.
Yeah. And so how's the 457 different from 403B? There is no 10% penalty upon separation, no matter when you separate, no 10% penalty. In a 403B, you have to be at least 55, and that 403B has to be with that employer in order to do that. Non-ERISA, but like I said, many states have fiduciary duties. There is a 3-year catch-up rule that allows you to double contributions in the last 3 years prior to retirement. There's a little more to it, but just be aware that's available. And oftentimes there's not as much of this confusion with all these vendors. Sometimes there's just one. Contribution limits are exactly the same as the 403B. And here's the coolest thing that Ryan just basically mentioned is it's a completely separate contribution limit than the 403B. You can contribute in full to a 403B and in full to a 457. Their contributions are not coordinated, which is really neat. All right, and this is just for your viewing pleasure. This was me 22 years ago in Investment Advisor magazine in my wife's classroom in these ugly corduroy pants, although I hear they're making a comeback. So anyways, yeah, I've been doing this for a long time. The advocacy work, I feel like, has been great, but even though I've advanced in age, I'm not sure the 403B has advanced that much. So I'm hoping that everybody who's on this webinar will take this information and use it to help to help educators get better retirement plans. That's my hope. Ryan, I'm going to turn it back to you.
So we've got some additional resources. So the New York Times, it was Ron Lieber and Tara Siegel-Bernard did a great series that I highly recommend if you have a Times subscription. If you don't, email me, I'll gift you some articles. Ryan@deliberatefinances.com. The New York Times 5-part series, they're all in-depth articles and they go really, really deep. And it just gives you like the human side of what this is like if you're a teacher trying to navigate this. And so if you're an advisor who wants to help someone, I think it's really helpful to just hear the perspective of teachers. 403Bwise and 403B Compare. We have a couple of questions, Scott, about 403B Compare, what's included, what's not. So we're gonna answer those in a minute. There's a podcast through 403Bwise, like a Learn by Being Burned. It's kind of stories of people who, like me, made choices that they look back at in hindsight and said, I wouldn't make that choice again. Email Scott at meridianwealth.com. I'm going to repeat that here, Scott at meridianwealth.com, and he will send you a digital copy of his book. I read it years ago. It was super helpful for me. Again, to go back to if you think it can't possibly be this stupid and convoluted, it probably is. Welcome to 403B world. It's really important work. Educators need it, need the help. help. Emily Moretsky is great. She's a new financial planner. She runs an Instagram account called Teacher Financial Planner. If you're in the New York area, she is very, very well versed in the New York City pension, but also the 403B options there. So she's just generally good about talking about all things related to teacher finances. So we're going to, and the 403B Substack. We're going to take some Q&A. So I'm looking over here at the Q&As that is here. So some of these get pretty specific. I think we're going to lean on Scott for some of these questions. Somebody put in here that, yes, correct. 457 is not necessarily a substitute. They can be, you can do both, right? So I think you're right that one of the slides earlier on kind of seemed to indicate that it was one or the other, but it is not necessarily one or the other. If the 403B is really high fee, you should look towards a 457 if you don't want to put money in the 403B. If you have a great 403B and you have a 457 and you have the capacity to put money in both accounts, which probably means a spouse doesn't work in education just based on educator incomes, it's a great option to be able to do both. So definitely. So I think I just answered that one. Somebody asked me about options for a retired client. So Nathan, if I'm not being specific enough, please jump in the chat and let us know. But I think your question is like, if someone's already retired, they have money in a 403B, what should they do? I think is your question. I mean, I think the first thing is figure out, like, can I just roll to an IRA? So that gets back to what Autumn talked about, check the surrender charge, check the total fees on the account. You're basically doing the math of, if I pay X in surrender charges today, and then it starts growing at Y rate, which is going to be higher based on the lower fees in some other account, how long until the break even, right? Is it worth it? And you have to be able to say, like, yes, it's worth it, or no, it's not. You may also be able to roll to another 403B product. So you might have happened to put it in a product in a 403B that's not very good, but they offer from another vendor a low fee, easy to use product. And so you might be able to roll it within that even after you're done.
Ryan, on that
Yes,
question, can I add to that as
please.
well? At the risk of being redundant, Nathan and everyone else listening, one thing I've done with clients sometimes is you can do a partial rollover of some money that doesn't have a surrender charge. And I think that was implied in what you were saying, Ryan, but just saying, hey, maybe we can take out 50% of this, but the remaining, we might be taking out 10% a year until we're at year 8 of the contract, at which point that surrender charge and the opportunity cost makes sense, or just the difficulty makes sense, where the dollars are not as meaningful as the effort it takes. Is the juice worth the squeeze? And that's a real question to be had too.
Yeah. And I think that brings up a comment that somebody made. I'm sorry, I don't know who made it, so I apologize. I'm not giving you credit, but the idea that different contributions have different surrender schedules is also a thing. So oftentimes the surrender schedule is based on from that contribution. So it's not the whole account is free after 6 years. It might be the whole account, the first contribution is free 6 years after you leave the job, but the last contribution might be years and years after that. And so you might get into splitting which ones are worth it and which ones aren't. A couple of questions I think Scott will probably be best positioned to answer is there's no information about Mutual of America on the 403BY's site. And then what if 403BY's doesn't have vendors in my local school district? So Scott, can you talk a little bit more about 403BY's, how it's built, what it's useful for, what it's not useful for, that sort of thing?
Yeah. So the tool that we have is, there's something like 14,000 school districts out there, and we have data for maybe 5,000. And that does tend to, I think the number is something like over 60% of school districts, but still that leaves out a lot of school districts. So if the information for the vendors for that school district are not on 403bwise.org, you will have to do some homework. You got to find out who the compliance administrator is. You'll need to contact, it's generally payroll or human resources, business, somewhere. It's different depending on the school district, but you're going to need to find out who the compliance administrator is. Sometimes it's as easy as typing in the name of the school district and 403B. Other times it's just a bunch of work. So you'll need to contact the school district, find out who the compliance administrator is, and then they'll have a link to, if you go to their website, they'll have the information for who the vendors are. Some of the big ones are TSA Consulting Group, it's tsacg.com, Omni, which is omni403b.com. They're actually the same company now. they'll have the information there. If you have the name of the compliance administrator, you can usually get the vendor list from their website. If none of those work, then you're going to have to go through the people in payroll or human resources to find that. And if you do all that work and it's not on 403Ys, please submit it to us. We have a way that you can actually submit the information and we'll actually update it for everybody. We get the information from people submitting it and then from some methods we've developed that I'm not going to get into right here. And as for Mutual of America, it's not rated because it's generally not a 403B vendor for public school districts. They're usually for nonprofits. And I'm just going to say that I'm not a fan and leave it at that.
Deal. We're going to come back to a question in a minute, Scott, about why are some fee-based fiduciary providers in the red? So I'll let you get that in a second. Somebody asked about TIA, CREF, and their annuity contracts. Here's the really tricky part about all this is like the answer is it depends. So I answered a question earlier for someone about Principal saying they have 2.62% fees on a 403B I worked in. That doesn't mean every Principal 403B is charging 2.62%. I'll say my wife's employer had a Voya one that was horrible. The one that I showed on the screen at the beginning, like that was my employer. That's where don't date at work. You might marry somebody. So that was mine, right? And then I and several other people pushed them, and then they stopped doing the annuities, but they were high fee mutual funds, right? So it was like target date funds with 1% fees. And then we pushed and pushed and pushed. And now like she's been at this job for 15 years and she's getting a Voya plan that has Vanguard target date funds and we're paying like 0.28, 0.29%. So like not amazing, but pretty darn good as far as public school 403Bs go. So it's hard to say whether TIA is good, bad, etc. Like it's just very plan dependent. One thing I will tell you is the guaranteed contract within TIA. So they have that like guaranteed annuity. It literally uses the word guarantee, which, the thing we're all not supposed to say. It is usually pays a decently high rate, but everyone should know that you cannot get out of that unless you take it out over a 10-year, I forget if it's 10 or 9 years, but you basically have to take it out 10% at a time. So if somebody's in the guaranteed fund within TIAA, that can't come out all at once. You can't roll it to an IRA all at once. You can roll it 10% this year and 10% the next year and 10% the next year after that. It takes basically a decade to unwind. I'm slightly wrong in my details here, so don't quote me on that. But just it's hard to say any one vendor is great or any one vendor is terrible because the same vendor in a different district might be charging totally different prices. Anything to add to that, Autumn or Scott, before we talk about the red category on 403B wise?
Yeah, on TIA, they do have a TIA traditional guaranteed that is surrender free, that you don't have to, you can get out immediately. Okay. It's the SRA or the GSRA, but anything that has RC, GRA, RA, RCP, it's 7 years.
Alphabet soup.
Years. Yeah, and it can be a nightmare, but sometimes the rates are really high and might be decent. They are yellow, by the way, with us because their fees are generally higher and also because of all the regulatory issues. They've just been going after their member base and selling them all sorts of products that they probably are inappropriate.
I'll say I've had some times where I've looked at someone who's in the TIA guaranteed product, and what we've done is say like, okay, we're going to count that as kind of the bond portion of your portfolio, right? The safe and steady portion. And so we've essentially gone more aggressive with the IRA or the other spouse's 401k. So at the household level, the asset allocation is appropriate based upon the fact that we can't get out of a certain guaranteed product that might be paying a pretty good fee, pretty good rate, not a good fee, good rate. We want to make sure we end on time. So quick answer, Scott, to this question: why do you have some fee-based fiduciary providers in the red category? And then we'll turn it back to XYPN.
Any product that requires a third party, we put it as red because we don't believe any teacher should be required to go through somebody in order to get a simple 403B product. That's it.
Good answer. Okay, so we are wrapping up here. Scott, Autumn, and I are all fairly, accessible on the interwebs. You can find us if you have questions, but we'll give it back to XYPN to wrap up.
Yes, thank you. I will be quick. I did want to just take a minute to thank all three of you for joining us today. This was so informative. As a non-financial advisor myself, I still had many good takeaways. I think this is really informative, and I know everyone is going to be able to put this to good use. So thank you so much for your time today, folks. And then anyone out there, if you are interested in learning more about XYPN, we'll drop a link in the chat where you can schedule a call with one of our folks to learn more about what it takes to launch a firm with XYPN. We'd love to help you. Of course, use that code for $100 off your ticket to XYPN Live. We'd love to see you there as well. So looks like there's lots of emails in the chat there for folks to connect with Ryan, Autumn, or Scott. So please be sure to grab those before you leave. And don't forget to fill out that survey for us. Tell us how we did today and how we can improve and what else you'd like to hear about. So, all right. Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of your Wednesday.